million UFO sightings are reported each year. Most can be debunked, but 5% remain unexplained. These are the close encounters. Edwin Fuhr is a hard-working Saskatchewan farmer.
Very scary, Gary.
His neighbor Gary is a notorious practical joker.
Edwin Fuhr was a farmer. Farmers get to know one another and they're very familiar with one another. They help each other out. And he and his neighbor would sometimes pull some practical jokes on one another.
Edwin?
Today is Sunday, and for Edwin Fuhr's wife, Sunday is serious business.
You're gonna be late for church.
Looking like rain.
Suit yourself.
Edwin Fuhr decided that rather than go to church, he would head out and catch up on the harvest. Edwin Fuhr had been farming in the same area with his family, sharing in the operations for quite some time. It's very common for entire families to continue the tradition of farming a particular patch of land for many generations. I had the opportunity to talk with Edwin Fuhr a couple of times, and I found him to be a really nice and assuming fellow who is a typical Saskatchewan farmer. He notices not too far away from him, just off the side of the field, something glinting in the sun.
What the devil's he doing now?
His first thought was this was his neighbor who always liked to play pranks on him. And he gets off to go investigate, okay, what's the prank this time?
But as he got closer, he saw that this thing was spinning.
Sees a metal object that's spinning at a high rate of speed.
He described this initially as a very metallic object, like some sort of brushed aluminum. It was fairly smooth without very much in the way of blemishes, and it was rotating, which made him very, very puzzled indeed, because this was certainly not a duck blind and nothing with which he was familiar. And he could also see that there was some sort of pipe or rod sticking out.
Some type of probe that is moving out away from the object and is basically probing the marsh area. So now his mind is spinning. What is it exactly? Is this real? Am I imagining things? What should I do? He realizes he's also isolated. There's no one else around. He's all by himself. He begins to feel the fear, the anxiety, the desire to escape and to run. gets on his tractor, it's not turning on. It's like in the old science fiction movies. He tries to put his key in and turn the key, but nothing happens. He doesn't know, is it because of the object or is it just because of his fear?
It almost seemed like some sort of military operation.
While working his land, prairie farmer Edwin Fuhrer finds a strange spinning object. It appears to be siphoning water from his marsh.
It is curious that in some cases the UFOs themselves are in contact with the water, either entering the water or perhaps there's a water tower or a marsh or something like that that the UFO seems to be attracted to.
The object in the water rises up. And that's when Edwin notices something even more spectacular.
He sees 4 more of these objects, and they're all spinning at a high rate of speed.
To have 5 observed at one time is really quite unique. All the objects appeared to be upside-down bowls with a bit of a lip or rim.
They're about 5 feet in height, 11 feet across in diameter.
There was no light being given off, no really loud noises. There's no reasonable mechanism of propulsion that's so silent. This case is particularly interesting because it's during the day, and during the day at close range. One of the objects rose into the air with a little puff of a gas or smoke of some sort.
The remaining 4 objects begin to vibrate.
And the others moved upwards in step fashion.
It almost seemed like some sort of military operation.
All 5 objects were about 200 feet in altitude, and there they remained for 1 to 2 minutes.
Edwin remains as well, captivated by the air show.
And then suddenly, all the objects were gone within a matter of seconds. He doesn't know what this is. He doesn't know what to think. A drone-type object doesn't really fit into this. This story occurred in the early 70s, and at that point in time, I'm not aware of any type of drone that could have explained this.
Edwin notices something up ahead.
Edwin walked over to the area where these things had been hovering. He discovered that the grass had been laid down and swirled.
Almost every one of the areas he saw was the same size and diameter. If this had been a normal type of aircraft that we're familiar with, any object capable of doing that would have probably been rocket propelled or powered, and the grass underneath would have been charred. There was no burn marks. There was nothing other than just the physical movement that this object had done to the grass.
What's interesting about this case is that it may be the first example of what would later become crop circles.
In most of your crop circles, all of a sudden a farmer wakes up in the morning and there's this elaborate, intricate crop circle that has been put into his field. And in this particular case, we have a farmer who actually observes this unidentified flying object as the circle is being created. and it was basically a flattening of the grass.
But we have to be careful here because most crop circles are now thought to be hoaxes. And in this case, we have a witness who saw objects create the swirled patches in the grass. In crop circle cases, no such objects are normally seen.
The crop circles become central to a follow-up investigation. When the RCMP examine the site, they find no evidence to suggest that the circles were man-made. 2 days after Edwin Fuhr's encounter, he finds a sixth circle near the previous 5. 2 weeks later, a seventh appears. Within weeks, no less than 15 circles are reported in 7 different sites in Saskatchewan. The RCMP send their evidence to the Canadian National Research Council, who claim that the circles are likely fairy rings, a circular pattern left behind by plant-killing fungus. But many experts dismiss that theory because fairy rings are rarely of uniform size, and while they leave a mark on vegetation, they have never been known to make clockwise swirling patterns.
What the hell is that?
What's that?
There was a communication between Kraft and the observer here on the ground.
I think we should get out of here.
Be advised, Chief. Local law enforcement's already on the scene. Rendezvous on Chester Street.
Roger that. ETA 2 minutes.
Veteran Fire Chief Dave Athens responds to a local 911 call.
That's a good session. Whoa, there you go. There you go. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Just checked with the homeowner, Chief. False alarm.
You call it in?
Yeah, just now. Time for coffee.
Why not? Pretty quiet at HQ.
Yeah.
So did you see the game last night?
No, I was working.
Yeah.
Danbury is a small, quiet town on the border of Connecticut and New York State, some 30 kilometers from the Hudson River.
The area of Hudson Valley consists of upstate New York. It's a fairly affluent area, very well-educated group of individuals, business professionals that occupy and live in that area.
Walk-off homer, bottom of the ninth. Those kids never quit.
What the hell is that?
Airplane?
Dave Athens saw a series of multicolored lights, very odd kind of lights, in the sky, flashing.
Even though we're dealing with upstate New York, we still have a lot of air traffic due to the close proximity of New York City. That area around Hudson Valley is one of the most heavily traveled air traffic areas on the planet.
No airplane I've ever seen.
Athens noticed that the object was speeding up, slowing down, hovering at times, in an odd kind of pattern that didn't seem to have any sense to it, maybe.
Oh, it must be some of those prop planes out of the local airport.
I don't think so, Smith.
If planes were causing this, they would have to move at a nice steady speed. They can't hover, for example. Planes can't do that. In addition to what you might say was a ring of multicolored lights, there were some smaller red lights that were initially near the center of the craft, but they were moving independently of this ring, as if they were not really attached to it.
Those aren't just lights.
All right, I'll check it out.
The red light appears to have some type of relationship with the larger object, in a sense that the larger object may be some type of mothership.
People have come up with the name mothership to refer to this large object that seemed to be carrying with it these smaller ones, and in this sense it might match what Athens was seeing that night. Shortly after Athens was observing this, several dozen people came and joined him because it was such a distinctive sight in the sky.
1812, go ahead.
Just checking to see if there's been any reports of an unusual nature, strange happenings at all in the area.
What the?
It wasn't until the object moved closer that many witnesses were able to discern, as they described, girders or structured beams that were affixed to these lights.
The object was gigantic. It was hard to miss it. People wondered, you know, is this thing going to come down further? And if it does, what's going to happen? This is dangerous to have 300-foot objects flying through the air in an area where there are airliners and other aircrafts.
What are you doing, Dave? I think we should get out of here.
In Danbury, Connecticut, a growing crowd witnesses a bizarre boomerang-shaped craft hovering less than 500 meters above.
The witnesses described an unsettling feeling that they were being observed. Like there was some type of connection with whatever intelligence was operating these objects. They felt a slight paranoia, a repressed nervousness, you might say.
Nothing to worry about, folks. Just some small planes flying in formation.
That's bull, and you know it.
Dave Athens was having the same reaction and the same attitude toward UFOs that happens to almost every witness that sees something they can't explain, and that is they know it's real. They know they saw something unexplained, and somebody else can't convince them otherwise.
Especially since this is not Dave Athens' first encounter.
So good.
Yeah, this is a good place to be.
In March of the same year, he'd had a visual sighting with his girlfriend in New Salem, Connecticut, just a few miles to the south.
Oh, what a beautiful night. What's that?
In that particular episode, a ring of lights, basically multicolored in nature, approached them and actually circled around literally in front of them.
No, really, what is that?
If a 300-foot object can creep up on you, you know, that's what it did.
I don't like that. What the hell is that?
I think because he was an intrepid fellow, maybe somebody kind of with a sense of adventure, he decided that he would try to signal to it with his flashlight.
What are you doing, Dave?
He used combinations of 3 flashes.
And it flashed back at him.
So it appeared to be there was a communication between craft and the observer here on the ground.
I think we should get out of here.
They're back.
And now, Dave Athens is reliving that strange experience.
You see it the second time, now you're reinforced with the idea that it's real. You can't just slough it off.
Some of the onlookers wonder if they're staring at a top-secret military aircraft.
If these are top-secret military aircraft, why are they lighting them up like Christmas trees for all to see? Second, why would you be flying it over an area which is well known historically for heavy air traffic? It doesn't make much sense.
And then it took off.
Okay, folks, just some small planes. Yeah, I'm sure. Don't worry about it. You can go home now.
Chief Atkins, this is ladder 212. Do you copy?
Go ahead, 212.
Chief, we got a one-alarm fire on Maple Street. It's under control, but there's some strange lights in the sky.
The unusual sighting is part of what some call a UFO wave.
In the UFO world, when we refer to a wave or flap of sightings, it essentially involves a large volume of eyewitness reports in a fairly localized area. In this particular case, between the years of 1983 and 1986 over the Hudson Valley area, an estimated 5,000 reports were documented involving large, unidentified objects. We have firemen, police officers, city council individuals, business leaders, CEOs of companies that have all come forward with their testimony. These are educated, well-trained individuals whose eyewitness testimony cannot simply be dismissed.
Days after the Danbury incident, several security guards report a UFO sighting at the Indian Point nuclear power plant. They call the National Guard, fearing a possible terrorist attack. But the object disappears before it can be engaged or identified. Skeptics argue that the lights and even the strange triangular shapes were created by a group of Cessna pilots. A few local pilots do come forward to admit they were flying at low altitude in the Hudson Valley on the nights of the mass sightings. But the size and variation of speed witnessed during the sightings do not match with any known aircraft. While the Hudson Valley wave peaks in 1984, reports continue well into the 1990s, making it the world's longest-running UFO wave. To this day, there is no clear explanation for the sightings.